Hey, and welcome back to Link to the Cast, your weekly dose of video games and nerd culture ephemera, available everywhere good podcasts are sold. I'm your returning party host, Dave Ryan, and I am joined by the regular cast of characters. First, he is the platforming prodigy. It's Pegleg Robinson. How are you, my friend?
I ain't doing no fucking platforming this week, let me tell you.
There's
I'm right.
flatforming as you're lying on the couch.
I'm fine. Yeah, I've got my left foot kind of in an elevated horizontal position, so... Yeah, it's been a slow week, to say the least. I've not really been able to get around. So for anyone that doesn't know, I went wall climbing, or bouldering, as they call it, last Sunday. And we'd been there for about 2 hours. And, the walls, they're no higher than about 15 feet. It might be a little bit less than that. And the idea is that you climb up...
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to stop you there. You got to do the pro wrestling thing of saying they were at least 35 feet. Next time you tell the story, it's 50 feet.
Mark Modest is what they call me.
When you body slammed that wall, brother, it must have been at least 800 pounds.
And there was like 1 million people in the Pontiac.
And then I was behind shouting, "That's the wall, brother!"
But so if you've ever seen one of those kind of walls before, they have like different rocks of different colors, and each kind of color indicates like, okay, this is an easier route, this is a more difficult route. So you go up and you pick your particular route, but on the way back down, you can use any rocks to get back down. But with some of them, you'll get to a point where you can't see, like the rock is too small underneath your feet, and you just have to decide, all right, I'm just going to drop at this point. So on the last one, I was going to drop from, I'd say, a height of about 8 feet, when I mean about 45 feet. Mm-hmm. And the padding, like, that is below you, it's not like a mattress. It is quite firm, but it gives enough kind of, like, you can land on it, like, do a flat back bump, and you're going to be all right. And I dropped from about 8 feet, planned. And usually I'd land, bend my knees, roll back, and you're good to go. But I just landed, and my left leg just went the wrong way. And I heard a very loud pop, which I naturally presumed was me snapping a ligament. It doesn't seem to be that. The doctor was like, "Oh, it's just some soft tissue damage." I was like, "Cool, that's really specific, thanks."
Yeah.
But I can walk in it still, but I'm just kind of hobbling around, so yeah.
Best to stay off it for a while.
Yeah. So, been an excuse to play a lot of games this week.
What's the most unusual injury you've heard of somebody you actually personally?
Oh, jeez, blimey.
I broke my foot jumping off a drum riser. Is that a good injury?
It's a good one.
In a fit of rock and roll passion.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack threw a car tire in my face. Does that
No,
count?
I didn't. That was Biggs.
Oh, was it Biggs? Okay.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
To be fair, with the trauma to the head, I imagine it's a bit fuzzy who actually threw it.
Exactly.
The important part was that the tire hit you in the fucking head, man.
As a man who watched that happen, Mark, I still have to say it is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. It was Mark.
Was it one of the things where it's coming after him for a little while?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, the end of Prometheus. She's running away from the ship, but for some reason she won't move left or right out of the way.
No, it was a case of like I jumped. I think I jumped from like a sort of high elevated position, and literally as I landed, the tire was in my face.
So it kind of was that. So what Mark did, we were back in the day when one of our mates, Rocky, he had this video camera. So what do you do if you're a kid in 2001, 2002? You start filming Jackass style stunts, baby. Yeah. So it was a bunch of tapes of us doing dumb shit. But Mark jumped into a bush, and literally, Matt thought it'd be really funny to throw the tire in on top of Mark while he was in the bush. Now, if that had just landed on Mark like while he was in the bush, most parts of his anatomy, he would have been fighting. But what happened was, as Matt threw the tire, Mark's head and upper body started emerging from the bush where he was trying to get out like a normal person would. And as his head popped up, much like the game Whack-A-Mole...
I was going to say, is it Whack-A-Mark?
Dude, the tire... I mean, if he tried to throw this tire 100 times, he would not have got the timing as accurate as he did. It was a blind throw. It hit Mark in the face. It was on tape. I'd love to know if Rocky still has it. I couldn't breathe. I had no reason left in me. It was so funny. Once we'd established Mark was okay, for like weeks afterwards, I was thinking about
that
this.
was like fourth or fifth in the list of priorities at that specific moment in time.
It was so damn funny, man. Like the Tyre accuracy ratio there was insane.
What can I say, Jack? You're welcome.
Yeah.
Putting your body on the line for comedy since 2001.
I still can't actually hold it together thinking about this, and I would just, if there was a tape, if that tape still exists, I don't think Rocky's listening to this, but if he was, oh my word, I would love to see that in 2021, 20 years later.
When you mention people that like I know that have had the weirdest injuries, Rocky didn't have the weirdest injury, but the first time and really the last time that I went to like an actual skate park, because obviously during that period I was trying to skateboard as well through watching stuff like Jackass and CKY, and I was mainly doing street skating at that moment in time. I say street skating, I was just trying to fucking ollie outside my house. But we decided to go to a skate park, and we'd been there for about 10 minutes, and like I was on top of the vert, and I was about to go after to Rocky. He goes to drop, and he just lands and breaks his wrist or his arm like on the first try, and that was kind of at the moment I was like, you know what, I think I'll stick to guitar. Less chance of serious
by the
injury.
way, can I just complete the other half of my host duties and say that also joining us, the Roman Reigns of audio, Chelsea Shagger himself, Jack Lazell.
That's right, son. So one of my friends or colleagues from work the other day scratched his eyeball, like the cornea, and then couldn't see for a week because he had his COVID registration injection card in his hand, in the same hand he was holding his glasses. So he wanted to put his glasses back on and then just directed this thin strip of card
the eyeball
directly into his eyeball. He's the sort of guy that I would expect to do something like that. So I just when I saw him, I just shake my head.
A lot of the ones I can think of came from school, and the one that really takes the cake for me is a guy who will go unnamed. You guys don't know him.
It's not Brian then. I just
no,
immediately assumed it was former co-host of the show, Brian.
I didn't go to school with Brian, but like it wouldn't be beyond Brian's reach to do something like this. So at the end of PE, we were playing tennis outside on there's like a couple of like I say courts, it's on fucking tarmac, and they've just stuck a couple of posts in the ground to suspend a net from. At the end of like PE, match is over, and one of the guys decides that, you know, the way like the customary thing to do, walk up to the net, shake the hand at the end, which our PE teacher tried to make us do all the time, as if it was some sort of like grave
code of honor.
And
you were in ROH in the mid 2000s.
Honestly, so at the end of the match, instead of going right up to the net, he decided he was going to do the cool guy thing of like trying to just like jump over the net and do the handshake from the other side of the net. And like as he jumps, both his feet got caught in the top of the net, swung over and broke both his elbows.
Oh, both elbows! No way!
Yeah, he was in one of those like those casts, and that kind of made him look like he was a capital T for a while.
So he was T-posing, but in real life.
Essentially, yes.
Insane.
We used to, we had tennis courts that were on like concrete, and there were like 4 tennis courts. But during the winter, the nets would be down, and it was just.
Can I just say all
like
this tennis chat, prime Alan 4L content here.
Oh, definitely. But they would take the nets down, and you just have like a big football pitch basically, and we played at lunchtimes, and it was naturally like 22 against 22, just a complete fucking battle royale. But they would also have they would use the they'd have, was it netball, like with a really long pole? Yeah, so they'd have the netball on those courts as well, but they, for some reason, they hadn't actually taken them out of the court. They would just like by the side, but there was still like the pole and the hoop on the end. And I remember one time I was running, I was doing a bomb down the left wing like I was Mbappe, I'd say about a similar pace, and I got my foot caught in the hoop, and I was going so fast that I shit you not. Like when a motorcycle, someone on the motorbike falls off and they kind of skid along the side, like in their leather coat, whatever.
By the way, I'm loving the confidence in yourself. At first, you're as fast as Mbappe. Now you're as fast as a motorbike. You're taking Dave's thing from earlier in the show to art. I genuinely, I was going fast enough that as I fell, I didn't just kind of land and roll. Like I skidded on my arm first and kind of bounced along the gravel at least 2 or 3 times and just,
my arm was in pieces. So
Yeesh.
Actually, one that came to mind there was the first time. So I was talking to you off air about this when you were asking.
I was going to say, you probably have the worst football injury.
I've not funniest, but definitely worst. Where I've broken my ankle once, broke my leg once at the knee playing football, and then broke the knee again on a trampoline.
Sure, over here.
Yeah, I know, right? But no, while I was in hospital with the first ankle break, I heard the most comedic but also horrendous injury I've ever heard of. Where there was a guy doing now again, we were like, it was in the triage part of the hospital, like before I got brought in for scans and everything like that. So there's all the curtains separating, and you can kind of faintly hear what's going on in the thing beside you. So what had happened was this guy was some sort of builder or contractor, and he was working on a house and he fell off a ladder. That happens, it's horrible, accident like that. But he fell off a ladder onto a sink.
Oh.
And the tap went somewhere that a tap should not go.
Oh, no.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah.
Although a potential bit of revenge for Mark for me telling the story
It's a
about
revenge for the tap.
Mr. Biggs hitting him in the face with a tyre. In one of the same recording sessions, he jumped off the roof of a garage into a tree, and a tree branch went straight up Main Street. And he walked away afterwards. He was in such pain he couldn't speak. He just kept walking around to try and see if that made any difference.
I bet it didn't.
It made no difference. And yeah, he scarred the inside of his back area. So yes,
the back passage.
Tradesman's.
Yeah, or as Mark was describing earlier, his hoop.
Yeah. That's how you know you've been in Ireland for a while now.
Yeah, when you were talking about the hoop, I was looking at Dave on the little Zoom window here, waiting for like a flicker of a smile of a hoop joke he could make.
Yeah. The hoop god.
The hoop god. Gentlemen, it's been a while since I've caught up with you. I want to hear what you've been watching. Myself and Jack have some overlap, so let's go to Mark Robinson.
Yeah, so the night before last, I watched Luca, which is the new Disney Pixar animated film.
Did he live on the second floor?
He did not, no. This is the directorial debut from Enrico Casarosa, and it's a film that takes place in, I think it's set in like Genoa, like kind of southern Mediterranean Italy, and it's a boy called Luca who it's kind of like The Little Mermaid, but it's a boy. And there's heavy overtones of some Studio Ghibli in there, just in terms of like the setting and the kind of pacing of it. There's a lot of kind of, I'd say, kind of Kiki's delivery service.
Ooh, nice.
So it's very nice. It's very kind of pleasant along those lines. Like the stakes are very low. So he ends up getting out of the water, and for reasons that are never explained, while he's in the water and he's introduced as this kind of creature within the sea, as soon as he comes out of the water, he turns into a human boy. That is never explained how or why that is the case. And all of the other characters that also are like sea monsters can also, if they come out of the sea, turn into human beings.
It is a Disney movie, so I feel like immediately, like, you got to take that flight of fancy.
Yeah, it's just it just that is why it is, and that will never be explained. So you just kind of have to go with it. But he meets another boy who also is from the sea as well, and they spark up a friendship. And they have a poster of like one of those kind of small like Italian scooters, and their dream immediately is just, we have to get one of these scooters and then go traveling around the world. They end up going across to a small town called Porto Rosso, which sounds a little bit like Porco Rosso, so the Ghibli comparisons continue. And they end up entering a competition, which is like one of these triathlons where one part of it is swimming, one part of it is a pasta eating contest, and the other part is a cycling uphill and downhill section as well. They befriend
1/3 of that sounds great.
Yeah.
If the three of us were doing that, I volunteer for the pasta eating part of that.
They befriend a small girl there who enters this every year, and basically, they want to win this competition so they can get their scooter and go off. The stakes are very, very low, but it's actually quite a nice change of pace. Like, all films these days seem to have kind of mass escalation, end of the world type scenarios, and this is obviously just way on the other end of the scale. It's a very pleasant film. It has a very kind of sweet kind of message at the whole of it about being true to yourself. Never trying to kind of like change who you are for the sake of other people, just being true to yourself and family and friendship. And it's a very, very pleasant film. It did get me with the tears at the end. It does have a feel, it gets you in the feels towards the end, definitely.
They always do that, those motherfuckers.
Yeah, I don't think it's as powerful in the way that Soul was, because that really hit me. That really broke me.
Soul Inside Out from the last couple of years really got me.
Yeah, and I don't think the stakes are high enough to hit at that level, but I do think that just overall, just a really pleasant film, like just from beginning to end. There was no part of it where I was like not looking at my watch, but just no part of it where, other than obviously that kind of big plot device there about changing from sea creature into human, which they never explain, but you get over that pretty quickly. Just a lovely film, like a very easy recommend, and it's on Disney Plus. So. Yeah,
I definitely want to check it out at some point, mainly because the main character looks an awful lot like my friend Ricardo, so I definitely want to watch it for that reason. If I can get one, I might take a picture of him, put it up with the main character from Luca on the feed, but I don't know. I'll have to get his permission before I do that, I think.
Speaking of Disney Plus, Jack, Loki.
Yes. Isn't Loki getting very good?
See that segue there? See that?
Yeah.
Now, I still haven't watched episode 5 yet, so take it easy on the spoilers.
I will say the show is getting very good, and episode 5, like the way that, so that obviously what you saw at the end of episode 4, Mark, and it kind of
Grant.
Yeah, exactly. But then it kind of looked like a gateway to what could be like some proper mad shit. And episode 5 is some proper mad shit. It has excellent deep references to lots of stuff from Marvel Comics lore, so people who are really into it can enjoy it from that perspective.
And also, like, you will enjoy it regard. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's just nerd bait.
Yeah, that was my next point. Pretty much is that, and on the opposite end of that spectrum, if you don't know, you just enjoy it. I feel like Tom Hiddleston gets to really Tom Hiddleston it up at one point in the episode, and I find that super, super entertaining. Richard E. Grant goes fucking full Richard E. Grant, which is exactly what I wanted from him as well. And yeah, the way that they've led the story up to this point, I think the pacing has been fantastic. And it's something that Garrett mentioned when he was on about how bad and how many holes there were in the Falcon and Winter Soldier. And that just hasn't existed for me in Loki so far. I think the pacing of the story and the episodes have all flowed really nicely. And I am super, super looking forward to episode 6.
Excellent job, I will say, by Garrett Kidney last week, filling in for me, and thanks to him again. I did appreciate, though, you making yet another attempt to stan episode 3 that a lot of people kind of were a bit woo on. But I will say...
like shows on trains, okay? Sue me. That's why Murder on the Orient Express, a lot of people weren't sure about the Bernard of it all.
Snowpiercer Lae'zel over here.
And I love it. I like Snowpiercer. I just like anything that's... I like trains.
Just like trains, man.
I do. Do you know what? I don't know if I like trains, but I find train infrastructure and stations and stuff like that interesting in a weird way.
Like the band?
If you like that, you like trains.
Yeah, I've always I've always found like abandoned tube stations and stuff like that really interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily a love of trains or just a love of like old architecture and like parts of somewhere that you don't get to go but you're interested to know what's going on, kind of thing. Anyway, that's a massive sidebar.
You never sounded more like James May.
From my perspective, the last 2 episodes they've been a real uptick for me, where I started kind of thinking, I think I'm starting to lose a bit of steam on episode 3. Like you said, Jack, there was just a plethora of insider stuff that was popping me. Something that I really appreciate about it is the combination of this and the other Marvel property we'll be talking about in a few minutes has made me much more clear on certain directions that I think are happening. When you combine those as well with what we know about the upcoming slate of things that are coming, it very much seems like a particular direction that we would be very interested in. So this is all good, and yeah, I'm just interested to see how, like, will it be a thing that tries to lead into... So the next TV project is What If, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the... that's like all animated, isn't it? But they've got, like, the legit voice cast as, like, all the people from the movies, basically.
The last acted role of Chadwick Boseman will be as T'Challa in that series.
Yeah, I think... Isn't RDJ back as well?
Yep.
Yeah, like everyone's in it, so I'm super looking forward to that.
So I wonder, will it like lead into any of these other properties that we know are coming up? Because we've got that, and then I can't remember what's next after that. Then, but there's basically something coming every 3 or 4 months for the next while. It feels like, because like Miss Marvel is next year and things like that.
So Cineworld over here, like I don't know if it was a good time to segue into the next thing that we wanted to talk about potentially from Marvel, but Cineworld over here, every time, like, since they've reopened the movies, they have a bunch of famous people talking about how much they love cinema and the whole experience and all that.
Yeah, we have that same thing.
Oh my god, they have one of Chadwick Boseman, and every time I see it, and him just like with his smile and how chill he was, and he was promoting 21 Bridges, and that was all in the background, and he must have been real sick at that point, and you just... his demeanor, everything about him, you would never know. It's so sad. It hits me in the feels every time, every movie I go to see. And to the first point where when I first saw it, when I went to see F9, there were like some girls like off behind me and to the right, and they all just let out a really big sigh. It's just like, oh man, it sucks. What a guy. And
like when we talk about the upcoming slate as well, like not only are there those two. Not only are there those shows coming up, but also something that until I saw this other property this week, I didn't realize is that there's 2 more Marvel movies this year.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, there's Eternals, and what's the other one?
Oh, Spider-Man is out this year, right? Isn't it?
Oh, isn't it the...
it's not Spider-Man, because there hasn't been a trailer for that. Like, literally before this film, there was 2 different...
What the fuck is it called?
Shang-Chi and the Seven Rings.
Shang-Chi,
yeah. I could have sworn Spider-Man was coming out this year.
It might.
No, I think they've only just started filming that this year.
No, because I think everybody is trying to predict. They thought that the proper trailer was coming with Black Widow, but
it's coming out 17th of December 2021.
Oh, so right, so there's 3 more this year. Now I know part of that is because of the backlog with the pandemic. Black Widow
pushed back. Yeah,
Black Widow was supposed to be last summer, which is funny because there's a character that appears at the end of Black Widow who we have met already, who we wouldn't have met were it not for the pandemic. It would have been the first time we saw this person, but you know, look, I'll tell you what, let's just get into Black Widow. You've seen it, Jack. Have you seen it yet, Mark?
I've been crippled since it came out,
so we will stay spoiler free, but Jack, on the whole, what did you think of it?
I just thought this is a kick-ass action movie. I think, like, from very early in it, straight away you're straight into some really cool action sequences, and like they're all filmed really well and they're really interesting, and I didn't really give a shit really about most of what was happening in the movie would be my only knock. I felt like the storyline and stuff felt weirdly inconsequential, even though I enjoyed it as it was going along. I kind of was just a bit like, meh.
I feel like it's one of those like 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to look at it like, I think it's a better film than this, but I think we're going to look at it like Thor: The Dark World, whereas, you know, Thor: The Dark World felt very inconsequential in the moment. This is regardless of the quality of the film, which I think is one of the poorer offerings. But the more time has gone on, the more we've realised what the Dark World set the table for, and put things off in certain directions. And I very much feel the most intriguing stuff that I'm still thinking about, I saw this last night, is the stuff that, oh, I think they're going this way with this. Oh, I think they're going this way with that.
Yeah. Theories like the post-credit scene, what they're going to do there, kind of what that was setting up with one of the characters in the movie, which was interesting. But I've got to say, I thought maybe the last scene, like the last big action set piece, was a bit heavy on the old CGI, and I know people complain about that a lot. It's like, especially saying, some people say it like completely ruined the end of WandaVision for them or whatever. But up to that point, I think all the action sequences in this movie were just so fantastic.
And
it was such an easy watch.
What makes it so jarring is going from that like almost Bourne style, like close up, hand to hand stuff, lightning quick, really cool stuff. There's a really like, it's one of those ones where I can actually think back of the fight scenes or the chase scenes that I really like, and as opposed to sometimes you come out with these kind of movies and it's all just one mishmash. Like I really loved the confrontation Natasha and Yelena have in the safe house.
Yeah, it's great.
Where they do, you've seen the little clip in the trailers of how they manage to disarm each other and also grab each other's guns in the same fluid movement and hold each other back at gunpoint again.
Yeah.
And some really cool, well thought out stuff like that.
I just remember one big criticism when you were saying that, but go on.
I think like if you know anything about it's not a spoiler because they're in the trailer, but Taskmaster. I think you'll know there's going to be some like good looking hand to hand scenes with what that character is bringing. But what's your big criticism?
I was gonna say, first of all, Taskmaster kind of would have liked a bit more of, but also it's Marvel. When they give you a sort of a sneak peek, like a sort of like a little look in at something, and then not delivering the whole way, that they might be stashing that. That might be being benched for a later push. So the Taskmaster character, that would be interesting. But my word, can fucking people stop? And he's on the all of the posters, and everyone knows he's in the movie. Can people stop employing Ray Winstone to do accents? Ray Winstone could not do accents. He is legitimately one of the worst actors on the planet at attempting to do accents. He was so terrible in The Departed that it was the only thing about that movie that I don't really like. I'm like, this guy's voice is off the fucking reservation. I
could not believe he was in this.
I just could not believe he was employed to be the guy that he was employed. To the point where, okay, so all right, again, Black Widow, where's Black Widow? She's called Natasha Romanoff. Like, we know she's from Russia, right? So, on that logic, Ray Winstone, as one of the people in this movie, not telling you necessarily who he was or why, there's a sort of 50-50 chance that he might also be from that part of the world. And I was like, oh God, please, if he is, can we just go
just do a Sean Connery in Hunt for Red October, where he just speaks like Sean Connery.
Death of Stalin, right? Or every movie Arnold Schwarzenegger ever did with no explanation as to why he sounds like that. But no, he's attempting an accent, and it's so bad. It's so bad. It's honestly, it actually takes a little bit of shine off the movie for me, because there's a confrontation scene between a couple of the characters that involves him. Again, no spoilers. And it just really took the edge off what should be a really dramatic moment in the movie for me.
It feels like they knew that in post, because his involvement in the film is pared back to where it's absolutely necessary to have him in. There is no throwaway scenes featuring him talking to somebody. Like, all the scenes he has with dialogue are the ones that are absolutely essential to the final cut.
What would make it worse, right? The film. His attempt at that accent, or if he was asking Natasha about the best offers in Carlton Corners?
I would rather that. Because Ray Winstone
if she came into the room and he's like, "Oh, Raymondo."
Yeah, exactly. He is by the way, Ray Winstone, I don't want to be too reductive, because I do think Ray Winstone is a good actor.
He just, as you mentioned, he's just not been doing accents.
Yeah, he's an interesting presence. I think just the whole look and
a pain you know too well, Mark. Master of accents.
We do have that in common.
Yeah, but then that's why we don't employ Mark to do a fucking accent on this podcast for 90 minutes. So I don't want to employ Ray Winstone to do a movie for 90 minutes with shit accent either.
One of the many notable similarities between Mark and Ray Winstone that we were always talking about on the show.
Yeah, exactly. That and the slick back hair, and the fact that they're both hard as nails. don't want to shit on it too much because you might make people think that I don't like the movie. I think the movie is a very good action movie.
I was going to say, I'll give a contrasting performance. David Harbour is an absolute delight.
Fucking love David Harbour. Oh my god, how good is he? Like, he just fills me with joy every moment he's on the screen. Like, his introduction scene is so cool. Him just like, do you know, there's almost a... I don't know if you go along with this, Dave. There's almost a little bit of like mid-period Jack Nicklaus about him in this movie, like his mannerisms and the sort of like little cheeky wink grin that he sort of has about him, that little bit of arrogance, that sort of like Nicholson arrogance that he gets in there. And I just... Yeah, I think he's so cool in the movie. I love Florence Pugh. I think
she's an incredible actress anyway, but she's really one of these. She's one of these people that, like, they need to find a way to move heaven and earth or find the right number value to hold on to her for years.
Yes, they need to get that contract in. But she's an STAR capital letters, like slam dunk. Everything I've ever seen her do, she's so good.
She's like on that level with like of young actresses now, like Anya Taylor-Joy, that if they're in something, I'm probably going to give it a watch because at the least the performance is going to be good, even if the film isn't.
Completely.
The thing that I've been intrigued about is like how this fits into the wider MCU, considering that obviously it takes place pre-Endgame, and I think as well
it doesn't matter. That's one of my criticisms is that it's in there, Mark, but it isn't that important.
And because the thing I was going to ask as well is the fact, and I think you mentioned this, is the fact that nothing really matters, and it's because obviously we are post-Endgame now, and that's always going to be, I think, one of the big issues with anything that happens in the MCU at this point. Is like, okay, everything that happens here, how does it fare in comparison to Endgame?
This happens just after Civil War.
Yeah, I know that much.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, like Jack said, a major criticism is that the things that happen in this movie don't really factor into any event that happens in between this film and Natasha's death in Infinity or in Endgame. However, the things that it is more preoccupied by, to a fault, because it means that the other parts of the time are inconsequential, is the stuff that it is imbuing meaning to that hasn't happened yet. So instead of setting up things and giving new context to things that we've seen since, what it's doing is it's more preoccupied with things that we're going to be seeing later in 2021 through the next couple of years. Yeah. So they've set up a couple of interesting TV and movie ideas essentially through this that I think it's so... I texted you about this late last night, Jack, when I was walking home. Is like they lay it on thick enough that I'm pretty sure these are the directions they are going in, and it's not just it's no, we're fucking doing it. Like.
And it's both of the Marvel things we've watched this week. It's episode 5 of Loki and it's Black Widow, and I kind of feel like that's not coincidental that these both show up in the same week, and we get pretty heavy allusions to something they're setting up in the future.
It may explain a bit about why. Do you remember we were talking 2 weeks ago about, God, it's weird that they were saying that the last couple of episodes of Loki only just finished and got sent to Disney a couple of weeks ago. Because it seems like maybe some stuff from like was reshot or added later on in production when they knew Black Widow was shifting. It's like, okay, right now there's an opportunity to do this that we're, it's not like the two don't interlock completely. We're not saying that, but it's more that elements of the episode that came out this past week and the movie are hinting towards similar directions is the best way I can.
Yeah, and we got traces of it in both other Marvel property shows as well, without giving too much away.
But I will say, just to kind of wrap it up on this film, that it's a fairly enjoyable watch. I think it sits like just maybe at or below the midpoint of, quality for these films. I think in some ways it's really entertaining. In some ways it's let down by you just wanted to kick on that bit more. I think when you have a movie that's spy heavy and hand-to-hand combat heavy, the inevitable comparisons are going to be drawn with the Winter Soldier. It is not that.
No, here's the thing, because
especially when you have Taskmaster flinging a shield around as well.
I nearly compared the two earlier. I would say that the action scenes and like some of the little like bits and pieces in this are on the level, but without the overarching story that really separates Winter Soldier from the movies around it at the time.
But as a whole piece, I would say it's like I described it in my Letterboxd review as like it's the comfortable pair of slippers you haven't worn in a long time. We haven't been at an MCU movie in the cinema since all this started. It was nice. It was enjoyable. Like I gave it either 3 or 3.5, and I think that's where it probably sits for me, like in around that.
I feel like 3.5 is about right. Maybe if they'd actually just put this movie where it should have been in the timeline, it would have been good. Like, so if you've never seen the MCU before and they had that feature on Disney Plus where you can watch it in timeline order, so someone watching this in 2 or 3 years time, I reckon for that reason might get more out of it. Do you know what I mean? Because they're like, okay, cool, the Natasha movie at the right time for the Natasha movie to be set, whereas now we kind of know what happens. It kind of deflates the balloon a little bit. So I wonder if from that psychological perspective, somebody new to the MCU might prefer it a little bit more. Maybe that makes the grading a little bit harsher. They'll still think Ray Winston's accent is shit though, but everything else about it I think they'll really like.
I'm also happy for 2 things to keep happening, and that's 1 for like female-led MCU films to keep happening, and 2, the other thing is for things that don't necessarily have to be sequential in the timeline order, because something I will always hold out hope for is that they get Chris Evans to don the shield one more time and do a period Captain America film. Oh,
it would be so good. What, like
him and Peggy?
I was gonna say set in the time where him and like he's gone back to Peggy in that timeline, and they're fucking with timelines now, and they're doing a lot of time-based stuff because they're clearly kind of setting up that multiverse theory thing, so it is absolutely doable. It's just whether after Chris Evans kind of hung it up, would he want to go back there? But I do think
he intended to hang it up, but also towards the end he seemed like he liked it a lot more than he did at the start. He just didn't want to be doing it as frequently because like to look like Captain America, like it's gruesome, I imagine, the process.
Strong, and like him in, say, Knives Out shows that there's a lot more strings to the bow of Chris Evans as an actor.
Eat shit.
Yeah. Chris Evans is a fantastic actor and like really genuinely likable, and also at the same time can play a fantastic arsehole, as he did so well in Knives Out and also in Scott Pilgrim many moons ago. So,
I'm heading to a 10th anniversary screening of Scott Pilgrim soon, one of the ones that was delayed from last year, and I'm excited to see Lucas
Dave, my word, if people were allowed into Ireland, I'd actually consider coming over to do that with you.
Jack, the other thing you were watching.
So I've got down This Is Pop, which is a Netflix documentary series about... It's not like a sequential, I'm going to go through decade by decade and explain pop music. It's just like little like spotlights on different eras of pop. And I've watched the first 5 episodes now, and it's really enjoyable. So like, you know, the first episode they have on there that really... because so the first episode is about Boys to Men, which just basically feels like a Boys to Men documentary, which I'm on board for, because I think anybody that was around our age who like in our early 30s now lived through that 90s and can remember Boys to Men just being ubiquitously all over the radio and all over music at that time, even though we were really, really young. But the first episode that really kind of jumped out to me was there's an episode about auto-tune, and it just made me want to go and give T-Pain a hug, because he's really like, he tells a story, and I think this kind of went a bit viral on Twitter before I even knew it was from this series, and it's him explaining that Usher woke him up one day when they were on a plane together flying off to do a gig to tell him that he completely ruined music by introducing auto-tune. And him saying that kicked off like 4 years of feelings like self-doubt and depression and stuff. And I came out of that and I was like, you know what, fuck off, Usher. Because T-Pain seems like the nicest, most likable, up for a self-parody, brilliant human being you could ever meet. Like, he met his wife and and stuck with her all the way through that time. Like, you know, like he's just like a salt of the earth type character, you know, like a real normal guy.
Yeah, only one of those 2 men was in the I'm on a boat video. So that's all I'm saying.
Precisely, right? And yeah, it's interesting that, you know, they kind of talk about how that came about. It was just the best thing about, I don't know if you watched the Sound City documentary, which is about Sound City Studios in California, and how like lots of influential records have been there, and they got the original scientist who invented the board that's in there, that was like this, you know, vaunted recording piece of equipment, and he started explaining the scientific like properties behind it. In the same way, in this auto-tune episode, they get like a guy who's like a mathematician, also slash woodworker, who made the first ever auto-tune plugin, and he's like, you see him writing code and stuff, and I'm like, wow, this has gone in quite in depth.
Can I just say, now that you've mentioned the excellent Sound City documentary, from the album that came from that series, I can't highly recommend enough the song that Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins did with Stevie Nicks called "You Can't Fix This." It's a fucking banger.
I'm so glad you said that, as is the McCartney song, which is really fucking great on there as well. But yeah, the whole, like, that episode is great. There's an episode about Britpop, which again, if you're our age and specifically from sort of like the Western Europe region, it's impossible to be not to be swept up a little bit by that episode and the sort of impact of Britpop. And, you know, like, there's some people on there who don't pull a lot of punches about some of the bullshit that was going on around the time as well. There's a great episode about the influence of Sweden on the history of popular music. It's just a real good time. It's a really interesting documentary series. It's kind of done 30 for 30 style, where each episode has a different narrator, has a different style, has like different direction and different ways of displaying its interviews and showing its footage. I would definitely highly recommend anyone who has like a remote bit of interest in pop music or just music in general to watch this documentary series, because it's real good.
So just quite quickly before we move on, I watched two things this week I wanted to talk about briefly. The first one is Fear Street, Part 1, 1994, which is on Netflix. So I don't know if you know much about this whole film event series that they're doing with this, do you?
Not at all.
I've just seen on Netflix, I've seen Fear Street pop up, but I have no idea what it is.
So what's happening is, Fear Street is like the other multi-book series by R.L. Stein. And it's a very kind of like tropey, slashery sort of kind of pulp novel series that he's done. I haven't read any of them, I must confess, but
are they more adult-based than child-based?
They're kind of like, they'd be pitched towards that maybe young adult into adult. Like, it's definitely the kind of age where people get into slasher movies is what it's pitched at. It's pitched at slasher movie enthusiasts, I would say.
I see.
And that's what this is. So the original plan for this before the world ended was that they were going to make a trilogy of films. Fear Street 1994, Fear Street 1978, and then Fear Street 1666, and release them 1 month apart in cinemas.
Okay, interesting.
Now, a lot of people have said that you know, the happenstance of the pandemic making them move the trilogy into a 2-week release window on Netflix is actually better, because especially, I'll get into this 1994 film, but like the idea that, you know, everyone would go see 3 films, you know, in 3 months in the same series might be overestimating people's appetite. Somewhat, especially for like a series that no one has much purchase into yet, because these are the first films coming out of this series. So what they're doing, is they're releasing basically one every Friday over 2 weeks. They're doing 1994, and then they go way back to see the origins of the evil from you know, the last time it attacked in 1978, and then when it all started in 1666. And it's interesting because, like, obviously the films are going backwards in time but forwards in the narrative. That's kind of like maybe one of the interesting hooks. I have to say, it was off to a very tepid start with 1994. It's a film that I kind of just, like with a lot of those dopey, dumb slasher movies, I kind of just enjoyed a bit as I was watching it. But the more I've kind of thought about it in the week since, and the more I've kind of listened to other people actually going, stop, let's actually think about what they're doing in here, the more I think it's fairly, like, even for the genre, quite lazy at points. The thing in particular, that is very grating for a lot of people, and it was for me even at the time, even before I had to reflect on it, was the amount of needle drops. So you and I, Jack, big fans of Patrick H. Willems. He recently did a video about the importance of needle drops in films. For those of you who don't know the term, it's basically referring to when a piece of licensed music is used at a particular time in a film to evoke either an emotion or to the kind of a lot of people say as well that it can often be used quite lazily to let you know this is when this is set. So, you know,
Zack Snyder.
Well, no, what I'm thinking particularly is that anytime anything is in Vietnam, you can guarantee you're less than 30 seconds away from Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, or if someone's coming into England, you're going to get London Calling.
Or from Flight of the Valkyries or something like that in Vietnam, which, as well, Zack Snyder did in Watchmen. He used Flight of the Valkyries when Doc Manhattan goes over to Vietnam. But anyway,
I would just say, like, that is probably one of the best researched, most well put together documentaries that you can see for free right now. Please go Patrick H. Willems on YouTube and watch it.
You could say that for almost every one of his videos.
I could, but in particular, you could tell just from the level of passion and enthusiasm that he put into that, just how much time that must have gone into that. So yeah, please go watch that.
It's on a level for, I think, the ones he put the most amount of thought into are like that, the one where he tries to rewrite the Matrix sequels and fix all the problems in the screenplays, and the one where he tries to decide mathematically which the best Simpsons episode is.
Yeah, that is also very good.
Yeah,
as is the sports one. I was shocked by how much he put in that one too.
So yeah, it's a very tropey slasher film. Like, it was fun for me to stick on in the background on a Saturday afternoon and just watch people get cut to bits and chased by monsters and stuff like that. For the most part, it's very paint by numbers. You get a couple of cool, gnarly kills at the end, and that's kind of partly what you want. Like, you watch a Nightmare on Elm Street or a Friday the 13th to see what really fucked up ways of killing unsuspecting teens they've come up with in this one. You know, they do come up with a couple of one in particular I'm just like, oh fuck me, I'm kind of like, I'm relatively interested enough to watch the second one, and you know, when I'm in two films, then I might as well watch the third one. I feel like the third one, if it's 1666, the worst it could be is a real bad rip-off of, like, The Witch, as they call it. Yeah, with The Witch. I love The Witch. It's a great film, speaking of Anya Taylor-Joy. But yeah, I'm not holding out much hope. You know, the trailer made it look like this is very much going to be like a Friday the 13th, you know, Camp Silver Lake sort of rip-off thing. But we'll see. The one thing I do want to make note of, we talked about people who are just like Florence Pugh, who are, you know, bona fide, this is a megastar. So do you guys know what I mean in terms of a slasher film when I refer to, like, the Drew Barrymore role?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about, like, the start of Scream.
Yeah, where she's, like, it's almost like a little self-contained. It reminds me very much of, like, in a James Bond film where you start off the scene with James ending his previous adventure. So, like, the opening scene of Scream is famous for Drew Barrymore being, like, the co-ed that gets murdered before the film starts, and then she's not in the film. So, in the Drew Barrymore role in Fear Street 1994 is Maya Hawke.
Okay, cool.
Maya Hawke, who again was in, you know, she's used to these period horror things now because she was in season 3 of Stranger Things. She was in briefly in period movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and she's somebody that in the limited roles we've seen her in, she very much has a film star quality. Like, you know, we're going to be looking back at years to come, go, God, wasn't it crazy when she was only getting these tiny roles and things.
I'm annoyed that you brought out Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I was going to be like, how fucking good was she in that movie? Yeah,
she's so good in it.
Oh.
And it's why, like, you know, he's always talking nonsense about sequels and then never actually delivers on them. But if there's one time I really want Quentin Tarantino to deliver on a sequel idea he said out loud in an interview, it's the one where Maya Hawke is the star of Kill Bill 3 as the bride's daughter.
I mean, please just do that.
Yeah.
And then faces off against, like, Vivica Fox's daughter.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
God damn, that would be great.
Yeah, it absolutely would be. So yeah, Fear Street, 1994, maybe a background watch at best, I think. And I think the needle drops are going to annoy a lot of people because they're really, not only are there a lot of them, but they are so on the nose that it will irritate you. The other film I watched, which I have a much higher opinion of, is Censor, which I was talking to Jack a little bit about in our DMs last week.
Yeah.
So this is one I saw on the latest Red Letter Media Half in the Bag. As soon as they explained the premise, I turned off the video because I was like, I want to watch this shit. So it's also a horror movie. It's apparently the first directed feature by Prano Bailey Bond. It stars Irish actress Niamh Algar, and a few others that you'd kind of maybe recognize from bit parts and things are there. It's another one of those horror movies that inexplicably Michael Smiley pops up in, and like when Michael Smiley pops up and he's got a weird fucked up grin on his face, you know shit's gonna go down at some point. So what it's about is it's a horror film set in a very fascinating part of film history, and that is during the video nasty era in the UK. As you boys being from the UK, I don't need to tell you, the video nasty era is essentially when a lot of overly violent or overly sexualized films were banned in the UK, and there came to be like sort of a black market, under the counter culture of these video nasties getting traded around.
Particularly enjoy Edgar Wright's story about a section of Evil Dead that they removed, and him having a bootlegged version with like a really poorly edited version of that scene into the movie. And
it was like proper illegal to even have these, and if you were a store that was doing them under the counter, super, super illegal. But this is set during this period, and it's a woman who works for I can't remember if they were called this at the time, but the BBFC. She's on the censorship board, and her job is to sit and, you know, dissect the films and give them their final ratings and things like that. So the start of the film shows how a recent murder in the area by a serial killer named the Amnesia Killer is linked to, the killer himself claims that one of the videos approved that people think should have been banned, that was his inspiration to do the killing. So there's some flack on the censorship board that they shouldn't have let the film pass, because this guy has gone on then to do these horrific killings. So they're a bit shook by this, particularly our main character, and they go to review the next film, which is this film called Don't Go in the Church by an obscure director called Frederick North. And as she's watching it, it is eerily reminiscent, to a fault of the circumstances that led to the disappearance of her sister when they were children. So what you end up with for the rest of this film is a bizarre kind of her trying to investigate how this director knew so much about their life. Is her sister still alive? Where is her sister? And also, how much of this is she remembering right, and how much of this is bled over from the film? Is she distorting reality? There's really interesting stuff done with that in it. This film is only it's less than an hour and a half long. I think it's 82, 83 minutes, something like that. It is well worth it. It's brilliantly, beautifully shot. I think I said it to you, Jack, that at points, especially when the lines between what is real and what is not start to blur in the final act, it starts to be, and you can see by the poster, it's shot like those Italian horror movies, like Dario Argento films, things like that. I think it's scored very well as well, in a similar tone. I really liked this. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, obviously, because of the genre it is, but I think it's well worth looking out. If I was to recommend one of the two between this and Fear Street, if you're looking for a horror film, this is the one to go with. I think it's really good. And Niamh Algar seems like somebody I'd want to see the next couple of things she was in, because she's absolutely brilliant in it. I will say as well, in terms of production and the way it was shot, I won't say what, but something really very interesting I can't remember ever seeing before is done with aspect ratios at the end of this film, and that's all I will say about that. But check that film out. Big recommend for me.
Yeah, I know Mark Commode was super high on it, so yeah, I do at some stage, even though I'm like not a massive horror guy, I do like really original horror movies, and that totally sounds like one.
Right, video games. Just me and you this week, Mark.
I'll go first, because I was playing a whole bunch of this last night and this morning, and I'm close to the end of it. Boomerang X is a game that dropped yesterday on Steam and on Switch, and I've been watching clips of it over the last couple of months or so up to its release, but I didn't like dive too much into seeing what it actually was, other than it was a first-person shooter, and it was invoking elements of Ghost Runner, not in its themes, but just like mechanically, which was enough for me because Ghost Runner was one of my games of last year. And it very much plays along those lines. It's a first-person shooter, but the game kind of centers around one mechanic. That is, you have this boomerang that you can use as both a projectile, but also as a slingshot. So when you throw the boomerang, as it goes off in whatever direction, if you immediately press the trigger button again, you'll actually fling yourself to where you have thrown the boomerang. And as the arenas that you go into become kind of more vertical in their size and just like bigger in general, you are just flinging yourself around this arena to deal with the enemies that are in front of you.
So it's kind of like a ropeless grappling hook, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah. And like, you know, a lot of the pacing of the game and your movement, like it does invoke a lot of that sort of Doom / Ghost Runner, where you forget to breathe for several minutes because like just everything's coming at you. But where Doom is a little bit more restrictive in terms of its movement, because you're really relying on the jump pads to get around, and Ghost Runner has like these kind of specific boards that you use to do the wall running on. With Boomerang X, there's literally just like, if you can see a part of the arena, you can get to it. And you kind of really understand this when you come to like the first big arena that takes place in like a forest, and you've got these really high, tall trees with like these kind of walkways. Kind of like if you've ever been to Kew Gardens, they have like these sort of treetops that you can walk along with these kind of long wooden bridges, like walkways.
Yeah.
You can get up there and you can kind of look down and see everything that's around you. The game is sort of split into like 3 sections. So you've got the arenas with your battles that you take place, which I'll get to. You have like these kind of small interconnected areas where the exposition, you know, there is an attempt at a plot, but there's as much of a plot as there is in Ghost Runner or in Doom, and that's all you need to know about that. And then you have the areas where you pick up your new abilities and you get to practice them out. But the crux of the game is in these arenas. It's based on like a wave system, so you may have one arena that has like 5 waves. And with each of these waves, you have a selection of enemies that may be specific to this area that you're being introduced to for the first time, but you also probably come across them later on in other areas as well. And with each wave, the difficulty, the increase in difficulty obviously goes up. With each wave, you have, in the top left or top right corner, it shows you these kind of small like yellow or gold coins. And they indicate how many of the enemies that have these gold coins above them, you have to clear them out. So you might have like 30 enemies on the screen, but there's only maybe 7 or 8 that you actually need to get to. But depending on where they are, depending on, you know, what's going on, they might not be immediately obvious like where they are or how to kill them. Because certain enemies, you can't just throw your boomerang at them and kill them. Some of them have like a soft or a weak spot. So there's like one particular creature that its job is to spawn these kind of like floating enemies that are quite similar to the like big mechanical floating fucks in the Matrix that I can't remember what they're called, but you know, you deal with them in like the last Matrix film. And they're pretty fast, and they get really annoying if there's a lot of them on the screen. So as you're looking around the arena, you're kind of pinpointing, right, I know there's like maybe 5 different types of enemies. I know that one's going to spawn more of that type of enemy, so I want to go clear them first. Oh, but I've also got this giant eyeball thing that is like firing death lasers from across the arena, so I have to keep in mind that that's happening. And what you realize pretty quickly, like Doom and like Ghost Runner, the game does not allow you to stop for more than about half a second. Like if you're standing still, you're going to get hit. So you're constantly just moving around. But it does a cool thing that as you're flinging yourself around, when you're holding your boomerang, if you hold the left trigger, you go into like a sort of matrixy bullet time slow-mo period for a few seconds. So it gives you enough time to kind of look around, survey what the fuck is going on, then you come back into real time and you plan your next attack. It is chaotic, it is frantic, it is anything that I said about Ghost Runner last year is applicable to this. I think this is a excellent video game. It's only about 3 to 4 hours long, and all of the arenas that the kind of combat situations you get put into, most of them don't last more than about 4 to 5 minutes, if you kind of have an idea of what you're doing. The difficulty is that, like, say you've got 6 waves, if you get up to like the 4th one and you die, then you go back to the first one again. But death is there to sort of teach you, like, okay, I know what's going to happen for these first 4 waves. I just need to get to that one again, and I'm sure I can get to the last bit. There is a little bit of like a sort of puzzle element to it. So one of the abilities you get is if you kill more than 2 enemies in one go with your boomerang, you then get this sort of like use the force spread shot ability that allows you to kill, like, it kind of disperses out and you can kill a bunch of enemies in one go. If you kill enough enemies, I think it's only like 3 or 4 with that, you then get like the next upgrade of that ability, which is like a rail shot, which is required because there's a specific enemy that if you try and get close to it, it will just like disappear and teleport to the other side of the arena, and you can't get them unless you have this rail shot. So on top of everything in terms of planning, okay, what enemies am I going to kill first, you also have to plan, like, okay, I need enough enemies in this one area so I can use the spread shot to then get this rail shot ability to then go kill that fucker over there. So there's a lot of like strategy involved as well. It's not just spamming your boomerang to get around the arena and just killing everything in one go, because you can kind of do it, you can brute force it a bit, but you do need that little bit of tactical awareness of, right, I need to get enough of these creatures here to deal with them, to deal with this over there. Yeah, I think it's awesome. I've got about 4 areas left to do. Again, it's only about 3 to 4 hours long, but within a day of playing it, it's one of my favourite things I've played this year. So, yeah, it's on Steam, it's on Switch. I don't know what the Switch version is like, but I am about Boomerang X.
No Game Pass, no?
No Game Pass, unfortunately.
Speaking of Game Pass, I've been playing Football Manager 21 this week, which is available on Game Pass Ultimate for PC or for Xbox. Thanks for that, Jack. And yeah, it's that kind of like time of year where I just dip into a management sim for a while. And it's like, I'm not going to spend too long on it because I think like Football Manager games by and large are the same every year, just with like a little bit more detail. But something I've kind of really come to appreciate is not how much they've dumbed it down, but how much they've opened up the customization to allow you to be as involved with the full version of that thing as you want to be. So something that would be tremendously off-putting for a lot of people was the degree of micromanaging which you used to have to do at clubs. And over the years, they've started putting in more and more controls and ability to defer and delegate different responsibilities at your club to other people. And you have it to the point now where like you can literally toggle things in the setup for your career, where if the only thing you want to do is handle the actual matches themselves as they're happening, you could do that. Like, I like to put the training wheels on a little bit. Sometimes, when I do my first one of the year, because it's just something I want to be leisurely playing as I have a movie on the TV. And I've been kind of doing that where like I have my assistant manager handling like a lot of the training. I can still go in and do stuff, but he'll kind of like schedule the training and things like that. I won't have to go through that trouble. And I identify my transfer targets, and then if I want to, I can send my director of football to go and actually negotiate the deal part of it. He's like, I'll just be able to say to him, I want this player, go get him. And if he can make that happen for my transfer budget, then he will. Yeah, it's really cool. I've been trying to get into something I haven't put a huge amount of time into in recent years, and that is stuff like set piece designs, like what I want to be doing at set pieces. I watched a recent Athletic video, a TIFO video with the Athletic that was given a couple of tips on ideas for what you can do at set pieces to make them a bit more manageable.
I saw that video title come up, and I was like, this has Dave Ryan trademark written all over it.
Yeah. Just some interesting things you can do that like make a lot of sense. Like when you watch enough football, the idea that you can, like, say for example, I've got a Harry Maguire in my team who would have a great leaping ability, but as we've seen from like obviously you boys with England and me in particular with Man United, you will know that in terms of goal threat from set pieces with that head, it's sparse. You know, he's got a couple, but you know, more often than not, they hit the slab head and they go anywhere but in.
He's very much got the thwomp element of slabhead in that the amount of times he makes contact with Super Mario is rare.
He will usually win an aerial challenge. He will usually get the header off, but the actual directionality of the header is the bit that he's really lacking.
Yeah.
But so you can do different things.
In my head, I don't know why. Sorry, Dave, to interrupt, but I just imagine giving Harry Maguire Tim Cahill's heading ability. Like, tiny little man you wouldn't expect to be able is incredible in the air. Yeah, that's what he needs.
100%.
Yeah.
So you can do things like I've got Harry. Obviously, I'm managing United, so I've got Harry in my team. I know the statistical likelihood of him actually scoring directly from a corner is low, but because he is big and because he's good in the air, he will be marked quite a lot. So I can set up a set piece whereby I use him to drag other people out of space. So I can get him to run near post, which pulls defenders to the near post and will allow like my secondary player making the run into the box as the ball is being struck, a bit of space in the middle if he makes it through. So that's been really interesting. They have in the last few years as well put a greater emphasis on your diversity of tactics. So, like, usually you would stick with one style of football and one style of formation, maybe with a slight variation in certain instances. And that would 90% of the time be fine for you. Now, you really, as the TIFO video said as well, you really need at least 2, minimum 3, or maximum 3 systems that you'd want to get your players familiar with. And stuff is factored into it now. Like, you couldn't, for example, and this is getting real inside baseball, but Jack will appreciate this at least, if no one else, that like you couldn't get them to train 3 different styles of like gegenpress tactics because they are so running intensive and press intensive that your players are going to end up with stress injuries, muscle injuries, trying to play that all the time or training that every day of the week as well.
Liverpool before Klopp adapted and was more pragmatic, essentially.
Yeah. So what I might do is I might set my A tactic might be the gegenpress or a vertical tiki-taka, something that's high intense, high pressing and focusing on dominating the ball or turning over high on the pitch. But then my backup for situations where like I can't do that because I'm against like a team in the later stages of the Champions League who is very press resistant or something like that, I would want something like I would want them to be familiar with a tactic that allows me to soak up pressure and hit more direct counterattacks, and then there'd be something more like an all-out attack or something that's quite balanced for, you know, if you're just in a cup game or something like that and you don't need to like overthink it because it's fucking Scunthorpe you're against or something like that. So yeah, it's been really enjoyable because I'm trying to get deeper into these systems. I'm moving the calendar along a lot slower than I normally would. You know, I'd be going through at a bit of a clip. And I'm trying to put more and more emphasis on let's recruit young players because, you know, that United squad in a football game like a FIFA or Football Manager has got a lot of strengths to it that you can probably, you know, not buy too many players straight away, and you'll do all right depending on where you set your goals for the season at. So yeah, that's the next couple of weeks is probably going to be that game for me. I would wager. That's why I get stuck in for a few weeks at a time and then bail out of it once.
Ask Dave, is there a way, and because I get super deep into the weeds in those games, but what would appeal to me more now is just the sort of team building element of it. Is there a way to essentially just be a CEO and an employer manager and let him manage all the games in that game?
I want to say there would be a way to toggle it. So like I said, you can toggle all the back office stuff and just handle the match day. But I imagine there's a reverse of that, where if you want to do all back office stuff, just sign the players, sign the staff, and you want to let your assistant manager handle the actual match, I'm sure that is possible.
Dave, do you know what I would love is if you did all the football stuff and I did all of the, like, I'm going to go and, like, get this player and that player, and, you know, do you think me and you could harmoniously coexist as director of football and manager of a football team?
I'm actually trying to think which one of the two of us is more suited to DOF and which one is more suited to... I probably am more suited to manager, am I?
I think that, yeah, I think you as a leader of men, like if you're taking the host duties on the podcast more, I like to sit back. I watch in person, I would say, a lot more football than you. Because I have the fortune...
Oh, in person for sure, yeah.
Yeah, because I have the fortune of being from a country where I can go and see like a real good standard of football at all times, I think. And my team being in my country is very helpful. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. I watch a load of football. I do. But
I think we'd be a good pair as well, because we tend to have a lot of similar views on how we think football should be played and what kind of young players we rate.
Who do you think? Can you imagine we got into a super blazing row about a player, and just like one player, and we like both dug in real deep on it?
I'm trying to think, is there any player I actively hate now that you really like?
Yeah.
I can't think of one right now.
I guess everyone that plays for Chelsea, but not because you don't rate them.
Yeah.
It should be noted while we're doing all this and talking about football, no one can see, but Dave Ryan is rocking a top-notch Jack Grealish look at the moment.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I hope you get on for more than 39 minutes on Sunday.
Yeah, unfortunately, the hair, like I'm at the... I think I said this maybe on a previous show, where like I'm at the point now where it's long enough that I kind of need to make the decision, cut it or grow it, but it's not so long that I can tie it back yet. So this is kind of if I want to be able to see the screen and not slick it back into evil lawyer hair like CM Punk, then a hairband or a hat is what I have to do at the moment.
That really is the worst length, isn't it? Like you just wish you could just be one or the other, because when you get to that mid length and it's just like I can't do anything with this.
Yeah, and it's my first time.
Look like a prick for 3 months.
It's my first time I've had it this long since it's about 20. So not only do I not know what to do, I've forgotten what I did do the last time. So yeah, it's the worst of both worlds.
Have you put Moroccan oil in it? That's the question. If you're going to go full Grealish,
I have not.
Have you seen Jack Grealish's full description of how he does his hair?
I imagine it would be mind-numbing.
The level of steps to it, yeah. I can't remember who it was, but someone last season when he was playing for Villa did a bit of a Chiellini and sort of goosed him a little bit and like ruffled his hair, and he was furious.
Yeah,
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to move from games we've played into a bit of a mailbag slot. And you know what? I haven't done this in a few weeks. Jack, I'm putting you on the spot. We're going to have a mailbag jingle.
So fucking really? I feel like you're just doing this because you want to see what absolutely off the planet dumb stuff that I managed to come up with.
You see, you need to not set such a high bar for weird on these, and I'll stop asking you. But without further ado, let's dip into the mailbag.
You've got mail. You've got mail. You've got mail.
With Marcus Tom Hanks and Davis Meg Ryan, we've got mail in our sacks and we're not lying. Jack and Dave Chappelle in the friend role. Answer questions, find right in your ear holes. What's a good game and what's a piece of shit? The lads will get right to the bottom of it. So get your questions in and do it post haste, and we'll cover you in our question answer base.
Mark, you put out a call on Twitter just asking for, what questions would you like to ask us on the show? And we got 2 responses. One of
slightly more trolling than the other, shall we say?
One of them from a man that I will happily, based on this question, describe as human trash tornado Sean McGee, who is just trying to sow discord between one of our favourite guests in him.
Can I just say, that's a great superhero name, Trash Tornado.
And the host of this program, who are very partial to this console. What was the worst of the very many bad things about Nintendo N-Shitty 4 console, he said. And I would have to say the worst thing about it are your takes on them, sir.
See, I'm going to come from this, right? And as you just mentioned, we are all very much fans of the N64 and we all owned them back in the day. But I can look at this, I can take a step back and I can see that there were certain flaws about the N64, and I will be happy to, divulge in this and give Sean his moment to kind of relish as I talk about the bad things about the N64. First of all, it has a very small back catalogue. I think that it's under 300 games, which is a minuscule amount of games compared to like the PlayStation, which, if I recall, has about over 5,000 games overall worldwide. So now, in fairness, the ratio of good games is actually quite high.
Part of that is down to Nintendo having very strict quality control. Like, you'd still get a Superman 64 and stuff like that.
You absolutely would.
But because of the cartridges and everything like that, Nintendo were a bit more choosy about who was allowed to put shit out on their console back then.
Yeah. The ports weren't the best. The Tony Hawk's 2 port isn't that great. The music, that's just, it's not great. The Resident Evil 2 port, I'm kind of amazed that thing actually fucking exists. Surprisingly, I mean, it's not really a port, it's more, I don't know how the hell you would describe Doom 64, but that's actually like one of the better versions of Doom.
I've come to appreciate that more over the years. Like, it's fucking weird as hell.
It is.
But the more time goes on, the more I appreciate that. I think my least favourite thing about the console, like, apart from, I think the most obvious thing is the Trident controller. Like, seems like a real weird idea in hindsight, designing something with 3 prongs for people with notably 2 arms.
Wait, hang on,
human beings
got
are
how
well
many
known
arms?
for. I know, right?
For fuck's sake.
But the thing for me about it is that if you don't have kind of like that appreciation and that nostalgia for it that people like us do, they certainly, a lot of the games on that console age very poorly.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're like, if say the younger generation, if they're coming back and they're gonna try and get into some N64 games that have been untouched and unpolished since that day, they're definitely going to take the Sean McGee side of things.
So in
which
fairness,
I'm sure he would portray that as history proving him vindicated.
I think a lot of the PlayStation back catalogue looks trash and doesn't play very well in, those early Tomb Raider games are fucking diabolical now.
It's the polygonal era. I guess the one thing you can definitely say for it over the PlayStation 1 is load times.
But I mean, the kind of the push and pull of that is obviously the load times are great, but it's a cartridge, so the amount of like space you've got to work with. I mean, it's one of the key reasons why Final Fantasy VII was ended up on the PlayStation, because that could never have happened.
Now seems like a good time to jump in and say that cartridges are the thing about it that I don't like, because I feel like if I go back, I still have my N64 and a bunch of games. If I go back and I want to play it, I feel like it takes a few attempts to get the cartridge to start up. I have to do the blow and all of that. And yes, it's nice for nostalgia, but this feels nice. It feels retro and old, but also at the same time, it's bloody annoying that I have to do it like 4 or 5 times if I'm going to get my game to work properly.
It's probably the best form factor for people who are our age at the time who probably shouldn't have been trusted not to scratch discs.
Here's the thing though, that at the time, obviously, there's the notorious weird bastard hybrid of Sony doing a disc Nintendo console. So you got like the Nintendo PlayStation thing that there's like 2 of in existence and is like hyper sought after as a collector thing, right? And then they turn heel on Sony, and obviously the rest is history. Went with Philips, that was a mistake, but I mean they've really at this point should have been on the CD market. Like Sega had done it, obviously not very successfully with the Saturn. PlayStation had done it and absolutely nailed it, and Nintendo just were holding out, and they really shouldn't have held out, because it kind of limited what they could do. And in a way, there were a lot of creative decisions that were made around the limitations of cartridges that I enjoy, and they give the games a certain quirk and a certain energy. And like Dave says, like the load times and situations like that were pretty rapid and cool because of that. But from the other perspective, it is cumbersome, it is annoying, it makes storing them difficult because they don't have like their own case they can go in, and you're like, well, I'm not going to hold on to the box, etc.
How much did you love it when like Nintendo Official Magazine or was it Total 64 would come with one of those racks for the cartridges with this month's issue?
Yeah,
those were boss.
Yeah, they're pretty cool, and those are one of the things, like, I don't dislike the cartridges, but I'd say that is the thing about it that I have the least retroactive enthusiasm for. But then I'd also like to say that Nintendo 64, in terms of the games on it and the memories that I've had with it, is one of my favorites. And again, a lot of that might be childhood nostalgia, but I love my N64.
Look, it has Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time / Majora's Mask.
Yeah, and so, you forgot to mention the best of all the games on there, Mario Party 2. So, yeah.
There you go. I just want to kind of bring up the controller again as well, because I know it's probably the most contentious thing when it comes to the N64. And while everyone kind of makes a point about it is ridiculous that you have a controller that you need 3 hands for, there aren't, as far as I remember, any games where you are constantly shifting back between the D-pad and the analog stick. And like, I actually think that N64 controller in some ways was groundbreaking, isn't the word I want to use, but you think about how a lot of games use the D-pad these days in more of a kind of menu / inventory role, and you know, the N64 and the D-pad in a lot of the games was also used in a kind of similar fashion.
So it was a controller that I always felt was designed with a priority of problem solving as opposed to a comfortable form for somebody to hold.
Yes, which when you consider what happened with the next console they released, one of the all-time greatest controllers, in my opinion.
Like, they were coming into it with we want something like a trigger. We want a set of buttons out on their own to control a camera in a 3D space in the C buttons. They kind of came up with the list of things they wanted and just threw it together in the Homer Simpson car sort of approach to it.
Because I think
great analogy.
Not the issue, but the bigger problem that exists with those N64 games, and maybe to some extent the GameCube, maybe not, but that C button or the C buttons, when it comes to, like, if I want to try and emulate an N64 game, they're actually a hell of a pain to map, like the C buttons in particular.
Sure.
Like, you end up just using the right analog stick, but it doesn't quite have the same sort of form factor as just having the C buttons.
I was going to say, like, most of the things with the controller I can make my peace with, apart from the fact that if you're playing something like a Mario Party, that stick becomes incredibly painful on certain mini games.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to make a new N64 controller, I think the first thing is making that analog stick a little bit more, kind of durable and comfortable. You are right there.
That's only Mario Party 1, though. They learnt their lesson very, very quickly. Therefore, that's why Mario Party 2 is one of the all-time GOATs.
So we move on to our second question, which comes from Casual Wayne on Twitter. Rank these Valve third series entries in order of most to least likely to happen in our lifetime. Team Fortress 3, Portal 3, Half-Life 3, Dota 3, Left 4 Dead 3. I don't know. Who wants to tackle this first?
I would say that most likely of those, I feel like, is Dota 3.
Yeah. I would say, like, that's it's a kind of like, it's a cult game in some ways, that it's got like a small subset of people who play it, but they play it intensely and they put a lot of money into building things on that game. That it seems like it would be the easiest one of those to do.
I would say Team Fortress 3, actually. I think that would be far easier to put something together, fits more into the kind of current ecosphere of games as a live service.
The problem is Fortnite is very Team Fortressy in appearance.
If they had done it maybe whatever year Overwatch came out, if they had struck then before the market got so flooded with other things, because you got to remember as well, like if Team Fortress 3 comes in, it would do well, but the people that have the nostalgia for it are people our age and older. Whereas, like, I don't think it's going to shift a huge amount of the people of the generation that play Fortnite, etc.
That's true, but I don't think Valve would be making it like thinking it's going to take any of the market share of like a Fortnite. But I know Team Fortress 2 still has a strong kind of ardent fan base that I think that they would be more than welcoming of a Team Fortress 3. And I think just again, in terms of like development costs, I think that would probably be the least expensive.
I don't know. I think Portal 3
although
would probably be.
In some ways, the Team Fortress 2 fan base, even though I do think it's one of the more likely ones on this list, the Team Fortress 2 fan base have probably shown that they would be quite happy to just keep playing Team Fortress 2 forever.
There is that as well. That is a fair point.
I mean, none of us are in disagreement that Half-Life 3 is the absolute top least likely of these games.
I would say Portal is less likely to happen.
I think Portal.
No, I tell you what. Because Portal 2 is excellent, but Portal 2 clearly shows what the issue is with making a sequel to the original Portal. In that the original Portal,
2 weeks in a row with this one.
Yeah,
no,
he said this last week.
I let this go last week, but part of me, when I was listening back and editing, I was like, "No, fuck you, Mark. Portal 2 was really good."
No, I'm sorry. The original Portal is perfect. All right,
and it is.
Absolutely,
you're talking about the difference
beginning to ending.
You're talking about the difference between Portal 2, which is probably a 10, and Portal 1, which is probably an 11 out of 10.
Yeah.
But
also, Dave, can't you just make 10 higher?
Yeah, you can. You could make it 11.
And I think, I don't know if to say this is the most crucial thing, but like Portal 2 or Portal, that kind of story is its own kind of self-contained thing that has had its ending. Whereas Half-Life, as we all know, doesn't have that ending. And I think the reason that also it could be possible that we'll get something else in the future is the fact that we have Half-Life Alyx, which means that it's not a dead and buried series.
The thing about the two of those is I think it is exponentially harder to ever deliver upon what a Half-Life 3 would be than a Portal 3.
Yeah, because Portal 3 is just put clever dialogue in between physics puzzles, right?
Yeah, like what people want for Half-Life 3 at this point is something that just reinvents the wheel. Like, even though there would be a weight of expectation for sure on a Portal 3, I think once you nail solid puzzles in that and, a couple of new mechanics, kind of like Portal 2, where it's just like a lot of really solid puzzle. They added a handful of new mechanics to it, and people were delighted with it, irregardless of the story stuff they added in. Whereas with Half-Life 3, again, it's like the thing where Half-Life is synonymous with moving almost the entire industry forward. That it becomes like it is even a harder job than id did by far when they kind of rebooted Doom. Delivering a Half-Life 3 is something that, to my mind, is so difficult they just shouldn't bother.
Yeah.
I like maybe smaller things like an Alyx. To me, Alyx was less okay, we still have ideas, we want to do a Half-Life 3, and more like this'll fucking this ought to do those little SOBs.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I guess I look at it not from, because you make an excellent point there that I guess I hadn't considered, but in terms of, those Half-Life games kind of bringing the industry to a point from the perspective of like the first person shooter. And I think from my view of it is just like, they made Half-Life Alyx, and the ending of Half-Life Alyx could have just simply been like, that game could have just simply been the bridge between 1 and 2. But the ending of Half-Life Alyx directly played into the ending of Half-Life 2, Chapter 2, Liverpool 3. And so I think that because of that, I guess there is just still that, look, it's not completely closed off. There is still something at the end of this. Could be in 5 years' time, could be in 10 years' time. I don't know if it's like, hey, whenever the Steam box comes along, boom, Half-Life 3, day one, there you go and buy it. But I still think that there's just more there than, yes, and you're absolutely right, that like if you wanted to make another Portal game, just do more Portal and add more kind of ideas. But I still just think that everything that had to be done with Portal has been done.
I guess another thing that puts Half-Life and Left 4 Dead at the bottom of these lists for me is that, so Portal is way less contingent on the individual people making it, because the puzzle mechanic is so tight that once you get people who understand that, they can make iterations on that will still be very interesting and feel like Portal. Whereas within Valve, most of the significant figures behind the Half-Life and Left 4 Dead games are gone and have been gone for fucking years out of that place.
True, but Alex was done by the Firewatch guys, right? If I recall.
Campbell Santo.
Yeah, or to some degree they were behind it. So
I will never forgive Valve for that we never got in the Valley of the Gods that looked like it was going to be awesome from Campo Santo.
Fair, I guess there is that. But I don't know, I feel like that doesn't have as much weight behind it again, and I feel like a lot of my argument on this is stuck on the fact that Alex exists. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, I'd probably be in agreement that we'll never see 3, but I think just the fact that Alex exists means that there's something going on there, and they're not as strict about it has to be the core people behind Half-Life to begin with.
Yeah, so they could outsource it, or another studio could pitch them and say, hey, here's an idea for Half-Life.
I'm sure people have.
Yeah, I'm sure they have, and I'm waiting for IO to do it so we can have Gordon Freeman meets Agent 47. But I think it's a decent argument, Mark, to be honest. But yeah, Left 4 Dead,
I feel like there has been considerable reporting around the fact that multiple times Valve have been pitched by outside people.
I would fully expect
just let us have this property, we'll do all the work, and they're like,
Do we actually think that Left 4 Dead might be the bottom of this list?
I think it is probably, for me.
All right, so we've got Left 4 Dead at 5.
I would personally, if I could have control over it, put Half-Life 3 at the bottom for the previous stated reasons that I don't think they should.
Yeah, but just because they shouldn't doesn't mean they wouldn't.
I would probably because of the capital D discourse, just deactivate Twitter for a month when Half-Life 3 came out, because as unbearable as it is when any garden variety game comes out, it would be next level for Half-Life 3.
So should we just do a quick personal list, because I don't think we have the time to try and kind of come up between a list between the three of us.
So I would go Dota, Team Fortress, Portal, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life.
Okay, so you're going most likely to least likely.
Yes.
Right. Jack?
For me, I would say Dota definitely top of most likely. Then I probably would go Team Fortress, I guess, even though I don't think it's going to happen. But then I unfortunately I don't think any of these are going to happen. Then I'm going Portal 3. Then I'm going Half-Life 3, Left 4 Dead 3, I would say.
All right, I'll go Team Fortress, Dota, Half-Life, Portal, Left 4 Dead.
Yeah. Before we end that,
thank you for that question, Casual Wayne.
I just want to give some love to Casual Wayne, because I saw the recent loss of a pet for him. So yeah, love and good thoughts to you, sir. And I'm very sorry about that.
As a man with a veritable menagerie here in my house, I can only imagine what that must be like. So. Yeah. Big shout out to I think official friend of the show status we will grant to Casual Wayne.
LTTC love for you, Casual Wayne, my friend.
I think we need to get some friend of the show LTT stickers.
If we were still doing the link to the cast Twitch regularly, we would definitely have some friend of the show emotes at this point, I would say. Moving on to the news, we had a PlayStation State of Play broadcast this week. I must confess, due to work commitments that had me quite literally up mountains and in rivers, I have not stayed up to date on my State of Play news. It seemed like a lot of smaller stuff, and then a big look at Deathloop. What were your guys' kind of big takes away from the State of Play this week?
For me, the big things were Sifu continues to be one of the coolest fucking things that I want to get my hands on. That looks like something.
This is the
very
one with
much...
the aging mechanic, is it?
I don't know if there's an aging mechanic, but it's that kind of very like hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, so it's like
Absolver.
your character ages as you play through the game, from what I understand.
All right, so you start off as Jin and end up as Heihaki, basically.
Yeah.
If only.
Yeah.
But that's due early 2022.
Yeah, so the protagonist gets older every time they die. This allows them to immediately get back up and continue fighting, but you can't keep getting older forever. You don't necessarily get weaker with every death either.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Moss 2 was announced to VR. Did you try the original Moss? I know you're one of the three of us that has the PSVR.
I've played a little bit of Moss. I'm not sure about the title of Moss Book 2. It feels a bit kind of hoity-toity for its own liking, but yeah, I liked Moss.
To me, Moss was like everything that Moss wanted to be everything that Astrobot's VR adventure was, kind of thing. You know, like cuteness personified and a fun adventure, and just didn't reach that status of cult, I don't think.
There was a Death Stranding director's cut mode.
Damn it! I thought in a million years you would never mention this. I thought this was going to be my free run at this.
And I have really appreciated all the clowning on this week, because it's like, oh, thankfully Hideo Kojima is free from the oppressive editing of checks notes Kojima Productions. I was like, what does the director like? If ever there was a game that felt like absolutely nothing was cut out of it, it's Death Stranding.
Unfiltered Kojima in a game where you literally filter your own bits.
Yeah, I feel like we need to have a long conversation with Hideo. Like, do you understand what director's cut means? Did you just pick this up from Blade Runner? It's like, that's a cool title. I'll take that.
You should be so glad you don't live here anymore, Mark, because I am telling you, if we were stuck for content, we would have done a Let's Play of Death Stranding by now.
I would have moved out.
Look, you made it through Beyond Two Souls with me, so...
but like Beyond Two Souls was what? That was like a 5-6 hour game?
Oh no, that was like 10, man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure Death Stranding...
Remember that whole like 2 hours where we were stuck on a farm?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the way, the idea that, Dave, all you needed to do at one stage to get Mark to move out was just make him play a Hideo Kojima game.
Did we do Heavy Rain as well?
We did do Heavy Rain, yeah. Which had like elements of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Mainly just exactly that. There was Fist Forged in Shadow Torch, which is like this kind of 2D kind of action combat platformer where you play like some sort of mechanized rabbit. Which just looks really fucking cool. And it kind of looks like the sort of the game that may have been on like the Xbox Live Arcade back in the day. But that looks like something that I have interest in. And then I guess the big thing, obviously, is we had the 9 minutes of Deathloop. And I got to be honest, this, in terms of the gameplay, I'm still on board with. But just in terms of the presentation and in terms of the dialogue and everyone talking... actually took some of my interest away from the game because I found the dialogue to be rather intolerable. I found it to be quite bad, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I just watched this and I was like, I want to play Deathloop because
I still want to play Deathloop. But I think that the dialogue is... it almost sounds like... you know, with the last couple of years where they've been having those sort of like multiplayer combat games where they have the fake dialogue between, you know, gamers talking about, oh, go over here and extract this and do that, blah, blah, blah. It kind of felt like that in terms of like this sort of fake dialogue, but with like this forced sense of whatever they were trying to approach as comedy or humor in the that kind of like sarcastic style type of dialogue. And it just, I don't think it works at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hold back judgment, but I tell you what did look good. It's just how fucking fun this game looks to play, like the way it flows and just the general stylistic elements that you wanted it to have. It still looks like all of that is in there and it's been retained, and 9 minutes of like, you know, unadulterated just fun it looked like. So it
very much looks like an Arcane Studios game.
It does,
which is a good thing,
which is definitely not a bad thing. I really want to play whatever the Death Stranding race mode is, by the way. Take one of the weirdest fucking games in recent years and add a racing mode into it. It's just I mean, yeah, chef's kiss from me. I never finished Death Stranding, I must confess, though.
Yeah, part of me was like, when I saw screenshots of that, like, was that in Death Stranding?
It could well have been, yeah.
Yeah.
All of your packages. Yeah. I like the idea of, like, yeah, you have a couple of strapped up lads, and they've got to be making their way through the Death Stranding sort of wilderness with the packages all strapped to them, and that's the race mode. That would be pretty cool.
I will be curious at least to see how that looks, if nothing else, because as much as I just don't care for that game, it's a very, very pretty looking game.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see what that looks like on the PS5.
Yeah,
so
it's in that it's in that Horizon engine.
Yeah.
The engine.
Yeah, plus the music, again, I always remember how fucking great.
The low roar.
Yeah. It's just all... It had the makings of potentially being incredible.
Yeah. In fact, it needed a theatrical cut, not a director's cut. Like, somebody with a good editing blade in there probably could have made something a lot more decent.
I would call that the story of Kojima's career.
My word, by the way, did the Yakuza Lost Judgment trailer make me want to play Yakuza Judgment and think maybe this is my jump on point? Because I know, and friend of the show Matt Niner has informed me, that the combat issues that I've faced up against in a Yakuza game don't really exist in Judgment because it is more RPG-esque. Is that correct, Dave Ryan?
I have not played Judgment yet because I'm trying to play them in sequence, so I'm 2 games away from being able to tell you.
I see. Okay.
I'm on Yakuza 5 currently, so in terms of release order, I'll be going 6, Judgment, 7, and then hopefully I'll be called for Lost Judgment.
It has a skateboarding section, so you know.
Yeah.
How
that's
incredibly polished does Yakuza look now compared to like the style of the original games?
Mm. Yeah. Even when they went back in and rebuilt some of the old ones in the Yakuza 0 engine, those Kiwami games, like, they've made them look real fucking good. Yep. And even 3, 4, and 5, all they did went in, just gave them a resolution polish, didn't rebuild them or anything, and they look pretty decent for how old they are. Moving on to our next story, you want to talk about like something that there had been a lot of expectation on and then turned out in some ways to be a bit of a wet fart. We finally got to see our... we thought it was going to be the Switch Pro model. By the sounds of it, I was listening to Grub Snacks this week, the Jeff Grubb news show on Giant Bomb, and he was saying that this isn't actually the Switch Pro.
It's not even a semi-pro.
Yeah, that it's... So there's still some sort of premium, like, Switch 1.5 model coming out next year, is the scuttlebutt he's been hearing. But in terms of everyone thought this was going to be the one, and it's essentially just with a prettier screen.
Yeah, and enhanced audio. Don't forget that. They mentioned that in the trailer too.
And I suppose, I actually think probably the best feature of it is that you can wire it to a LAN connection.
Yeah. Here's a LAN
for
port.
network stability.
For all of those online Nintendo games that you're playing.
Yep. Yeah. Here's something that has basically existed in computer and video game technology since the early 2000s. We're going to put it in our console and we're going to claim that it's a new development.
Not only that, but like it's a thing that's been in existence that we had in our console and then just took out for this one for reasons.
Yeah, God, it was so... The fact that they just sort of... I'm going to use a term here, wanked it off in a trailer, like just didn't even put it in a direct, didn't like make a big like build up of we've got an announcement really coming that's going to change this, that, the other. They were just like, nah, here's the trailer, this is the thing, this is the new Switch.
Everything about this really is peak Nintendo in terms of just, boom, here's a tweet, here's a video, boom, here's a new Switch. Oh, by the way, it's not the Switch that you think it is.
Now, we've said before, Mark, because we were evangelists of the Vita in its heyday, and like an OLED screen can look choice.
Yes, it can.
It can. This is not the kind of thing that's like, oh, I better sell my Switch now so that I can get this thing.
Can I just put myself in a line with you two and say that I also love the Vita? Playing through the Metal Gear Solid remasters and Final Fantasy X remaster on my Vita were some of the best moments I had with it.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like it's Vita Island. It's the three of us and Greg Miller, I think, on Vita Island.
And Tearaway as well. Tearaway was great.
Tearaway's great.
Yeah.
Persona 5 or Persona 4 Golden, Fez. We were talking about that a few weeks ago. Playing Fez on the Vita. I have distinct memories of playing Fez on the Vita on a train to visit Mark when he still lived in England. But yeah, it's going to be 309 of the Queen's pounds, so not too far off what it was when the original Switch was released, from what I remember. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a wet fart, to be honest.
It's just like friend of the show Barry made the kind of point about that. It's good in some ways because it doesn't exclude anyone out from games coming out that may, The 3DS and the 3DS XL, I think, that was the one that had like games specific for that.
So no, it was the new 3DS.
The new
because
3DS, right.
XL was that was the one I got, and it was just like bigger screen.
I can't remember. There was 20 different variations.
I think I had like
the new
3DSs. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it was the new 3DS, and I think they only ever ended up releasing like 2 or 3 games that actually, like, there was a Xenoblade game, I think. Or was it a Fire Emblem? There was something like that, and it was like, yeah, it was dumb.
Yeah. So now I don't think that any company like would do something like that at this point, where they would fracture their player base like this. Like Sony and Microsoft didn't do it with their kind of 1.5 upgrades they did with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. So I don't think Switch would even do that, even whenever we get the Switch Pro or whatever it's called. But it does just kind of come down to like, what is the point of this console? Like for me, so the problem I've got is my Joy-Cons are fucked. So I need to either get new Joy-Cons or just wait for whatever that kind of Switch, 1.5, because I would probably get that. If that comes along, that has an OLED screen, all of the good jazz, I would probably end up getting that. And for the time being, I've mainly been playing my Switch as a docked console. So while it's nice that this has an OLED screen, I'm not really playing my Switch in handheld mode.
If it's a thing where this is a feature, brilliant. When this kind of stuff is the feature, it's like,
Get one of these. Get a Switch Lite. I'm holding it up to the camera in this now. And then you don't have to worry about Joy-Con drift or whatever, because the Joy-Cons are built in, and you can get this nice Pokemon Special Edition one like I did, because I'm an absolute loser.
So it's like, I guess there are people that may have had, like day one Switches that may feel that they just want to get the upgrade. But I think the problem is, it's kind of like the issue that Sega had in the 90s between the 32X, the Sega CD, the Saturn, and then the Dreamcast, is they all came in such a condensed amount of time. And specifically with the Saturn came along, and they'd already announced within, I think, like 6 months to a year that the Dreamcast was coming. So it was like, well, no one's going to fucking buy the Saturn then, because we just know that at some point in the near future we're going to get the Dreamcast. I don't know who is going to get this, unless you're buying a Switch for the first time, but then surely, well, we know the Pro is probably going to come, we imagine, within like the next year. So it's like, no one's going to buy this because they probably would rather just wait for the new Switch.
But the thing is, do they bring this out and then just quietly sort of stop manufacturing the base Switch, and this just takes over as the base Switch?
Yeah, I guess, but I still don't think that resolves the issue of people buying this with the intention of still wanting to buy whatever the Switch Pro is.
Maybe. I reckon they probably sell a bunch at Christmas, maybe, but
I'm sure they would. I don't doubt that for a second.
But when it launches, I can't imagine people going mad on it right away.
No, it's just, it's Nintendo. It is Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo are still, unfortunately, very Nintendo, even after that absolute glory period they've had for the last few years.
Right. Oh my god. Right. Assassin's Creed.
Oh no. Oh no.
So this is the new kind of like direction for the Assassin's Creed franchise, moving into, as we have heard, Ubisoft's like primary motivation now is the live service platforms for their existing IP. So, the future of Assassin's Creed will be underpinned by a new live service platform which ties multiple individual games together, Bloomberg has reported. Named Assassin's Creed Infinity, it's developed by teams at both Ubi Montreal and Quebec. Quebec will now lead development, a change for the franchise, which has most often been managed by Montreal. Yeah, so this has since been then confirmed by Ubi. Now, I'm looking at this in two ways. This doesn't make me any more interested in the franchise. I've always been a kind of every couple of years I'll pick up one when one looks interesting. I'm not a hardcore Assassin's Creed guy. This was a franchise that kind of burned out a few years ago when they were still on the kind of yearly release schedule, and they pushed it out to 2 years. So like maybe having some sort of consistent platform that they just add more stuff to over time will stabilize the wildly vacillating quality levels of these games. So in that way, I see some fringe positives. But also, the old man part of my brain, when I hear live service platform, I'm just like, switch off, not for me, thank you. What are you guys thinking about this?
I mean, it's eerily similar thought process, mate. I think I'm not surprised by the direction that Ubi have want to take in. They've seen all of the money, like the absolute filthy, disgusting levels of money that are being made elsewhere with games as a live service if you get it right. And they have an IP that, you know, it's not like launching an Anthem or something like that where it's a new IP and a few bad bits of reviews and feedback and the fact that the game kind of just sucked anyway can torpedo it day one. Assassin's Creed, if they're going to do it with a franchise, it's a good franchise to do. I mean, I have my dips in and out of being like the big open world Ubi collector more style game. I don't play every single one, but like they have their uses and their sort of you know, they'll distract me for a while from like real life or whatever, and I'll get into it and I'll get like really deep on some of them, but then others just kind of let go by the wayside because I know what I'm going to. So it is interesting that they're sort of changing the format up a little bit, but also not a format that I'm particularly fond of. I think it makes sense from this is a profit before creativity decision.
Let me just put it to you like this. So from May of this year, Ubisoft announced that in the past financial year they made a profit of $2.23 billion, and a third of that revenue came from microtransactions.
Yeah,
I think that pretty much says it all.
Yeah, that's the direction they want to go because they know there's more money in it, and yeah.
So, like, I don't know what this looks like. Whether it's like a kind of Hitman hub where just you'll have that, and they'll just kind of preload different areas and timelines, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a cut and shut, doesn't it, between a few different Assassin's Creed worlds and titles, and it's being led by a couple of different studios. That would worry me though, in that, you know, are those studios going to be 100% on the same page? Is everything going to run smoothly, etc., etc.? We'll see, I guess.
I mean, like, multiple studios handling different titles has kind of been a thing now in the industry for a while, so I don't think that's the issue.
Not condensed into one world, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I guess. Though I think like the kind of bigger issue as well is the fact that at Montreal, 3 managers previously accused of harassment or toxic behaviour remain at work unsettling staff. Other employee reports of racism and sexism have also not been acted on. So, you know, that's still a thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, fuck Ubisoft from that direction, 100%. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What have we got here? I
got one last thing, and this was mainly for you, Dave, because I actually had a question that I wanted to ask you once we actually kind of go through the news report. But Among Us, of all games, has added Irish localization, a cultural win for a thriving minority language. The Monster Hit game received a new update a couple of days ago, which brought with it Irish localization. Among Us is perhaps the biggest game ever to receive an Irish localization, although it is not the first. This was kind of spearheaded by Una Min Kavanagh, who worked alongside Kavanagh. Sorry, I will get my Irish pronunciations at some point. It was kind of there was a mod, and it officially got added to the game like last year, or now, I guess. So my big question, I guess, for you, Dave, like you are, a man that speaks Irish, to some degree.
Theoretically,
you got taught it at least, and can, spring out the words and sentences when you need to.
I at one time could speak Irish quite well. Yes.
Yeah. Irish in video games, like, is that? How much of a thing is that, or has been, or just has not been? Like, what is your kind of experiences with it?
Like, I suppose that the starting point would be for people to understand where Irish sits contemporary in the contemporary culture, and that is very much, as that story mentions, a minority language. There are only a couple of pockets in the entire country for which Irish is the primary spoken language in the Gaeltacht regions, and the population in those areas are quite small. So you're talking maybe like a few thousand people. Like, I don't have exact figures, but you're talking maybe a few thousand people in the whole country who communicate primarily through Irish. Outside of that, like there are two ways in which a lot of us interact with the language, and that is one, as you've alluded to, we are taught it in school from the start of primary school to the end of secondary. Unless you have an exemption for a learning difficulty, you are required to learn Irish until you are 18 in school. And that gives people a bit of a fraught and contentious relationship sometimes with it as they get older, and the idea that they can't opt into the language. But I think a lot of the history of making it a compulsory subject is tied to the fear of it being lost as a living spoken language.
Which is the case with a lot of like minority languages.
Yes. So I completely understand both sides of that, where I understand people who are frustrated that they have to learn it, but I also understand some of the reasoning behind why you would be afraid to make it an elective language, because it might do more harm than good to the actual culture. Something about our language as well is that it's tied up very considerably with our cultural identity, and this idea that, and I'm about to give the Brits a battering here, lads, so batten down the hatches for a second. This will be one of those times where Jack claims to be a son of Clare instead of anything to do with the country
absolutely
he lives in.
Robbed by Tipperary in the fucking hurling last week, but we won't go on to that.
It's one of those things that when we were invaded and conquered, and when the penal laws came in, which were these punitive measures to try and stamp out Irish culture and make us British citizens, one of the things we were legally forbidden from doing was speaking Irish at any time. So there has always been an overstated value put into the Irish language because of that period where it was, because of it being the attempt to stamp it out, it became more tied to our identity than it would have if the thing had naturally worn out and we had chosen to start speaking English instead. You know what I mean? So over my lifetime, there has been considerable progress in like Irish revival. One of the first times I noticed it growing up was when a lot of the words I would learn in Irish growing up were anglicized, or were Irish versions of fairly anglicized words. But as I was going through school, people were coming in and going, no, we have developed actually, or we are trying to get you to learn more actual legitimately Irish versions of these words, rather than something like in primary school we would have been taught that the word car was car in Irish, whereas we get to secondary school it's like no, that's anglicized, we want to call them glúisteáin instead, things like that. So when the segment of the population that campaigns for the revival of the language or its positioning as equal to any other spoken language. When they make a bit of progress, it's fantastic. I remember there was a big to-do around the time that we would have all been in secondary school where the Harry Potter books got Irish translations. That was a huge fucking deal at the time. We have an all Irish language television station that's on like Freeview, that TG Cahir, which is like, you know, it has gotten many plaudits over the years. They have a great social media account as well, I will say, for any Irish people listening to this that don't follow them. Their social media, as far as one of those kind of self-aware brands goes, is pretty good. I'm happy about Among Us or any game getting Irish localization for two reasons. One, because it is a major sign of kind of validation of that language for the people who still speak it a lot and speak it more eloquently than I do at this point, obviously. And from the other side of things, as somebody who was a teacher at one point in my life, I see this as a tool. That it is a way to make Irish more accessible and more practical to students trying to learn it. One of the problems that a lot of people have with the way Irish is taught in school is that it is very much, we're learning our verbs off by heart. It's repetition, and there's no element of practicality or conversationalism to the way we learn it until way towards the end when we have to start doing oral exams in our foreign languages in secondary school.
And I would say that Among Us, which a large portion of that game is based around conversation and dialogue, is a pretty good game, good tool to use.
Yeah, so we used to have really dodgy, like, kind of like, do you remember the foreign language tape sets, the Muzzy, where you'd learn French or Italian or whatever through these cartoons that the BBC put out, like dubbed into the different languages? Yeah. So there was an Irish one of that, and then there'd be like dodgy kind of MS-DOS or Windows 98 era games that would be put into Irish for you to try and learn, and they were just kind of like, they, even by the time we were coming through, felt really outdated. So it's really cool that now you could bring a class to a language lab in a school, knock on all the PCs, and go, look, you can play Among Us like you like to play at home, but here's the one rule. The localization is in Irish, so you have to figure out how to use all the menus in Irish, and you can only speak on the game in Irish. I think that's a really helpful educational tool. So I'm really happy about this. Like, I don't think this is going to necessarily create a domino effect where you're going to see like FIFA next year will be available in Irish or anything like that. Much as I would love it. But I do think it's important and it's useful, and congratulations to Untitled and anybody else that was trying to like petition for more games like this to get Irish localization.
God damn, that was interesting, Dave. Thanks very much for that.
Sorry, yeah.
Stay tuned next week, folks, for more.
It's one of those things where I don't think it's appropriate to weigh in for me to weigh in without giving the context that I have from a life spent with this language.
Man, I loved it. It was anyone would think that you'd done a lot of history in your past.
I know, yeah, that maybe I taught it in schools once.
Yes, exactly.
Upon a time. Yeah. But yeah, that's my take on it. I don't know if I'll necessarily rush out to play Among Us in Irish myself, having forgotten most of it and not really playing Among Us that much anymore since I'm back in work physically and the young people don't want to play it online now. That we're out and about, but yeah, it's cool.
Man, if you get a more balanced and educated take on Among Us being translated into Irish anywhere else, holy shit, I don't think that will exist. Maybe Danny O'Dwyer might be able to match it, but he won't best it.
Yeah, Waterford's own. Right, I suppose then on that note we'll leave it at that, will we?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's a kind of strong, it's a strong.
Yeah, I mean, there are three words that I've resisted saying in this podcast as it comes out on Monday after an event.
Is it up the rat?
No, I'm not Declan Rice, okay. But yeah, I'm very tempted, but I'm not going to do it just because it might make me look very stupid on Monday. But needless to say, on Sunday evening there is something happening that I'm incredibly excited about, and we'll see.
Is it the Copa America?
We'll see how that goes. Yeah, definitely. Do you know that's at 1:00 in the morning Saturday night into Sunday morning. So
Totally doable.
Depending on the result, you may be still up celebrating or having a depression nap.
It's not like we've ever stayed up till 2-3 in the morning for entertainment happening on the other side of the Atlantic before.
Yeah,
precisely.
Yeah. Right, on that note, we'll draw this episode of Link to the Cast to a close. Thank you very much for listening in. At Link to the Cast is where you want to go on Twitter to keep up with the shows as they're posted, to get your questions in for the mailbag. And you better start getting mailbag questions in now that Jack is going doing a jingle for us, so he'll be very sad and disappointed otherwise.
You just reminded me I have to do a jingle again.
Yeah, I love doing this. It's my favourite thing. Individually, I'm at The Day to Dave, Mark is at Lithium Project, and Jack is at Jack Lazell. Thank you very much for listening to Link to the Cast. We shall talk to you again next week.
Laters, nerds.